Hello, it's March 31st, and this is a brief discussion on Act 2, Scene 5 of The Merchant of Venice. If you haven't noticed, a lot of the scenes in this act are really small, short snippets, right? And this is no different than the other small, short snippets we've had. In this scene, we have a conversation and we have messages being sent back and forth. We have Shylock and Lancelot talking. And while they're talking, Shylock's also yelling for Jessica. This discussion is kind of interesting. Shylock is telling Lancelot about the differences between him and Bassanio. He's basically telling him that under Bassanio, he may not be able to eat as much. He said, thou shalt not gourmandize as thou hast done with me. Gourmandize. It's taking the word gourmet and turning it into a verb. And so Lancelot is a lazy servant. He sits around, doesn't do anything till he's told to do it, and he sleeps and eats. Kind of like a cat. So Shylock is telling him, working for Bassanio, you're not going to be able to eat as much as you want. You won't be able to just lie around and sleep and snore all the time. But the whole time he's doing this, he's also yelling for Jessica. They're kind of talking polite, but they're really put downs. At one point, when Shylock yells for Jessica, he's like, "Why, Jessica, I say, where are you?" Lancelot yells for her also. "Well, Jessica." And Shylock hollers at him. Who bids you to call? I didn't ask you to call. I didn't ask you to, or tell you to do anything. And Lancelot's like, well, your worship, or you, was wont to tell me I could do nothing without bidding. You're used to telling me I can't do anything. I'm no good. I'm lazy, that I won't do things unless you ask for it. So they're talking polite, but they're putting each other down. There was an interesting line here where I'm looking for it. It's reproach. Okay. It says here, I beseech you, sir, go. My young master doth expect your reproach. And Shylock says, so do I his, meaning I expect his reproach also. Now, I am teaching everything from the books that I gave you. I am not using the No Fear Shakespeare stuff. And on a whim, I looked at this scene in the No Fear Shakespeare that's linked in the Moodle site. And it said for my young master doth expect your reproach. It said that Lancelot really means my master is expecting you to approach. That's baloney. To reproach is to put down, to insult. Okay? And so Shylock is expecting Bassanio to insult him at this dinner. And Bassanio and Shylock's they're expecting each other to be rude to each other is what's happening. And they're saying it outright and openly. So pay attention to some of those No Fear Shakespeare things. So we had that conversation between Shylock and Lancelot. But we have some hints at getting caught with these secret messages and stuff. Lancelot walks up to say goodbye to Jessica, and he says, I'll go before. Mistress, look out the window for all this. So Shylock is telling Jessica not to go out the window for the party, and we'll get to that in a second. And then he whispers to her, there will come a Christian buy, will be worth a Jewess eye. That's his way of telling her that Lancelot will be around to get her. Well, before this, Lancelot mentions the party, right? He says they might have conspired, but who knows if there will be any masks around. And this sends Shylock into a tizzy. What are they, masks? Jessica, lock up the house, close the windows, don't look outside, don't listen to the Christians' music, don't listen to their pipes, or their flutes. Don't look out the window and look at their silly costumes. Just lock up the house and ignore them. But at the end of this, we know she wants to meet Lorenzo. In the very last lines, she's like, farewell, and if my fortune not be crossed, right? If things go my way, if the stars don't mess things up like they did in Romeo and Juliet, I have a father, you a daughter lost. So if things go my way, my father will lose his daughter. I am going to leave. So she makes this resolve to run away with Lorenzo if he shows up. There's some interesting things going on in this act as well, or in this scene. We have several religious allusions. We have the prodigal son, and Shylock refers to Bassanio as the prodigal son. The prodigal son story is, a guy has two kids. One of them goes off and leaves and never comes back. And he comes back all destitute, and he borrows some money from dad, and he goes out and he spends it all again and parties all the time. And then he comes back, and dad's so happy he's back. He gives him the spotted calf, and his other son is like, why are you doing this for him? You never do this for me. It's an interesting tale. But what Shylock is saying is that Bassanio is out there wasting all of that money he borrowed. So Shylock is okay with going to watch them eat all the food. Basically eating all that money that he borrowed, just wasting it. We have mention of Ash Wednesday in here. It's a very Christian idea, right? It sparks the season of Lent before Easter, which I think we are in now, right? And during Ash Wednesday, during the time of Mardi Gras, right before Lenten season, there were a lot of parties and parades and masquerades where people would revel, and they would wear these lacquered masks and hide their identity and basically party before they went without during Lent. So that's what those allusions are. And then Shylock at one point calls Lancelot Hagar's offspring, which, to make a long story short, is just saying Lancelot is non-Jewish, right? He's Gentile. I'll talk more about the Gentile word later. But if you remember the story from Genesis, right? Hagar had given birth to Abraham's child. And then later, Abraham's wife, Sarah, had a child. And so Hagar and her child, Ishmael, ran away. They were no longer Jewish. So that's what that allusion is there. So that is scene 5 in a nutshell.